There are moments when power exposes itself, not through strength, but through cruelty. Moments when a person at the very top reveals what they fear most, by humiliating someone at the bottom. This is the story of a man who built an empire on control, a CEO who believed respect could be enforced, dignity could be measured by clothing, and worth could be calculated in numbers on a screen. And this is the story of the day he crossed a line. In a glass boardroom high above the city, surrounded by executives, screens, and silence, he chose to humiliate a man who looked poor, without knowing who that man truly was. What followed wasn't lightning. There were no visions, no thunder, no instant punishment. Instead, something far more unsettling happened. The truth began to look back at him. If you've ever been talked down to, if you've ever felt invisible in a room full of powerful people, if you've ever wondered whether God still sees you when no one else does, stay with this story. And before we begin, if stories of faith, justice, and quiet redemption speak to your heart, consider subscribing to Heaven Walks With Us on YouTube. Here, we tell stories where broken pride meets truth and where even the hardest hearts are given a chance to change. Because sometimes, heaven doesn't shout. Sometimes, it simply walks into the room. The boardroom sat on the 47th floor, suspended in glass and steel, overlooking the heart of Chicago. From this height, the city looked small. Cars moved like insects. People became dots. Lives reduced to motion. Inside, the air was heavy. A long black table stretched across the room, polished to a mirror finish. 18 executives sat in silence, hands folded, laptops open but untouched. No one spoke. No one checked their phone. Even breathing felt loud. On the wall-sized screens, red numbers glowed like open wounds. Revenue down, retention slipping, a missed quarter, another investor call scheduled for that evening. Everyone knew what was coming. The door opened with a sharp click. Ethan Carter walked in without greeting anyone. He wore a tailored navy suit, the kind that fit perfectly without ever looking comfortable. His hair was neatly styled. His watch cost more than most people in the room made in a month. His expression was calm, but not relaxed. It was controlled, calculated. He placed his leather briefcase on the table and let it drop harder than necessary. The sound echoed. "Explain it to me," Ethan said, his voice even, almost bored. "How a company with this much talent manages to fail the same targets 3 quarters in a row." No one answered. Ethan began to walk slowly around the table, each step deliberate, each pause intentional. He stopped behind the chief marketing officer, glanced at her screen, then moved on without a word. Fear traveled faster than sound. This was how meetings went now. Not discussions, not collaboration, interrogations. Ethan believed pressure revealed excellence. He believed humiliation was an efficient motivator. And most of all, he believed that control, absolute control, was the only thing keeping everything from falling apart. As he continued around the table, his gaze suddenly caught on something that didn't belong. A man sitting quietly at the far end. Plain white shirt, dark slacks, shoes worn, but clean. No badge, no laptop, no title displayed on a screen. The man sat upright, hands resting calmly on the table, eyes steady. Ethan stopped walking. For the first time since entering the room, his expression changed. And with a voice low enough to silence every thought in the room, he asked, "Who are you?" And in that moment, everything began to unravel. No one answered Ethan's question at first. The man at the far end of the table remained still, as if the silence didn't belong to him. His posture was calm, unforced. He didn't look down. He didn't look away. He simply waited. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "I asked who you are," he repeated, a slight edge now cutting through his voice. A woman near the center of the table shifted in her chair. It was barely noticeable, but in this room, movement meant risk. She cleared her throat. He's with facilities," she said quickly. "Maintenance. We had an issue with the conference system this morning, and someone asked him to sit in until—" "I didn't ask for a resume," Ethan snapped. The woman shrank back, lips pressed together. No one came to her defense. They never did anymore. Ethan took a step closer to the end of the table, his gaze locked on the man in white. Facilities, he said slowly, tasting the word. So you clean things. The man nodded once. Sometimes. A few executives exchanged uneasy glances. Someone swallowed hard. Someone else glanced toward the door, as if considering escape. Ethan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You know, he said, turning slightly so the entire table could hear him, I've always believed first impressions matter. This company survives on standards, presentation, excellence. He gestured vaguely at the screens behind him, the red numbers still glowing. And then there's this. His eyes dropped to the man's shoes, old, but polished. To the shirt, plain, no logo, no brand, no attempt to impress. Ethan leaned forward, resting his hands on the table. Did you look in a mirror this morning? He asked. Before you decided to walk into a boardroom like this? The man's voice was calm when he answered. My clothes are clean. A quiet ripple of discomfort passed through the room. Clean, Ethan repeated, amused. Is that what you think the standard is here? He straightened, gesturing toward the executives in tailored suits. Look around, he said. Do you see the difference, or do I need to spell it out? Someone shifted in their seat. Another executive stared down at their folded hands. A third began typing something, then stopped, afraid to be noticed. This isn't a shelter, Ethan continued. It's not a classroom. It's not a charity. This is a billion-dollar operation. He stepped closer to the man in white. And you, he said quietly, are exactly what drags places like this down. The room felt smaller now. The glass walls seemed to press inward. Even the city outside felt distant, unreachable. The man took a slow breath. Is this about my clothes, he asked, or about something else? The question hung in the air, heavy and exposed. Ethan's jaw tightened. For a split second, something flickered behind his eyes. Anger, fear, recognition. Then it vanished. He turned slightly, reaching toward the side table where drinks had been left from an earlier meeting, and someone near the door whispered, barely audible. Oh no! Ethan's hand closed around the clear plastic cup without hesitation. Ice clinked softly inside it, the sound sharp in the silence. Condensation slid down the sides and dripped onto the polished table, forming a small, careless puddle. He lifted the cup slowly, deliberately, so no one could mistake what was about to happen as an accident. If you want to be taken seriously, Ethan said, his voice calm, almost instructional, you need to look the part. The man in the white shirt didn't move. He didn't flinch. He didn't step back. He didn't raise his hands. He just watched. Ethan tilted the cup. Cold water spilled out in a sudden rush, splashing across the man's chest, soaking the fabric of his shirt, dripping down his arms and onto the floor. A few cubes of ice hit the table and skidded to a stop near his hands. The sound was louder than anyone expected. Water striking skin, ice clattering against marble, breath catching in throats. For a moment, 3 long seconds, no one spoke. Then someone laughed. It was quick, nervous, instinctive. The kind of laugh people make when they don't know what else to do. It died almost immediately, swallowed by shame. A woman near the far side of the table turned her head away, eyes fixed on the city outside. Another executive stared straight ahead, frozen, as if blinking might make things worse. Near the door, a phone shifted in a trembling hand. The screen lit up. Recording. Ethan set the empty cup down with a soft tap. There, he said. Now you're clean. A thin smile touched his lips. Next time, he added, come prepared, or don't come at all. He turned his back, already walking away, convinced the moment was over, that the lesson had been delivered, that control had been restored. Behind him, water dripped steadily onto the floor. The man in the white shirt stood still, soaked, breathing slow and measured. He didn't wipe his face. He didn't shake the water from his sleeves. He didn't look down at the mess Ethan had made of him. He looked at Ethan. And something in that look was wrong. It wasn't anger. It wasn't humiliation. It wasn't fear. It was pity. Ethan felt it before he understood it. A subtle pressure between his shoulder blades, like eyes on him when no one should be watching. "Done?" Ethan said without turning around. The man's voice cut through the room. "Ethan!" The name landed harder than the water had. The room froze. Ethan stopped walking. Slowly, he turned. "What did you say?" he asked. The man stepped forward. Water dripped from his shirt onto the marble floor, each drop echoing in the silence. "I said your name," the man replied. His voice was steady, unafraid. "Ethan." A ripple of shock moved through the executives. No one ever said his name like that. Not without permission, not without consequences. Ethan's face flushed. "Who do you think you are?" he demanded. "To speak to me that way?" The man met his eyes. "Someone who knows why you do this," he said. "Someone who knows you're terrified of being seen." The air seemed to thicken. Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. Because for the first time in years, someone wasn't reacting to his power. They were looking straight through it. And near the door, unnoticed by almost everyone, the red recording light stayed on. The silence after the man spoke Ethan's name was absolute. No keyboards clicked. No chairs moved. Even the city beyond the glass seemed to pause. Ethan felt heat rise up his neck. Being challenged was one thing. Being addressed like an equal by someone like this was another. "You're out of line," Ethan said, forcing a laugh that didn't sound like one. "You think this is some kind of performance?" The man shook his head slightly. Water slid from his sleeve and fell to the floor. "No," he said. "I think this is who you are when you believe no one important is watching." A few executives inhaled sharply. Someone whispered Ethan's name under their breath. A warning. Ethan stepped closer until they were only a few feet apart. "You don't work here," Ethan said. "You don't belong here. And you don't get to analyze me." The man's eyes never left his. "My name is Michael," he said simply. Ethan scoffed. "I don't care what your name is." "I know," Michael replied. "That's the problem." The words landed softly, but they cut. Ethan turned to the table, gesturing broadly. "Let's be clear," he said, raising his voice. "This company doesn't run on feelings. It runs on results. And results require discipline." He pointed back at Michael. "And discipline means knowing your place." No one responded. They couldn't. The room had shifted. This wasn't a meeting anymore. It was something else. Michael glanced around the table, at the faces staring back at him, some pale, some angry, some quietly desperate. "How many of you," he asked calmly, "have gone home after one of these meetings and replayed his words in your head?" Ethan snapped toward him. "That's enough." "How many," Michael continued, unfazed, "have questioned your own worth because humiliation was framed as leadership?" A woman near the far end of the table pressed her lips together. Her eyes glistened. She looked down quickly, hoping no one noticed. Ethan's hands curled into fists. "You don't know anything about this company," he said through clenched teeth. "You don't know what it takes to keep something like this alive." Michael nodded once. "You're right," he said. "I know what it takes to keep you alive." The words didn't make sense, but they felt true in a way Ethan didn't like. Ethan laughed again, louder this time. "Security," he called out. "We're done entertaining this." No one moved. Michael took a small step back, as if giving Ethan space. "You can throw me out," he said. "You can pretend this never happened." Ethan smiled, sharp and thin. "Glad we agree. But it won't change why you're afraid," Michael added. Ethan's smile faltered. "And it won't stop what's already started." Near the door, the phone capturing everything tilted slightly higher. And for the first time, Ethan wondered, just briefly, how many people were about to see him exactly as he was. Ethan's patience snapped. "You think this is about fear?" he said, his voice rising. "You walk in here looking like that, disrupt a board meeting, insult leadership, and you expect sympathy? Michael didn't answer. He stood where he was, soaked shirt clinging to his chest, water still pooling at his feet. Ethan glanced toward the side table again. There were a few drinks left from an earlier presentation. Cups of water, half-melted ice floating on the surface. He reached for one. Someone at the table shifted sharply in their chair. Another person whispered, "Ethan, don't." Ethan didn't hear them, or pretended not to. He lifted the cup, holding it higher this time, making sure everyone could see. "If you want dignity," he said, his voice cold, "you need to look dignified." And then he threw it. The water burst forward, striking Michael's face and shoulders, splashing against his neck, soaking what little of his shirt had remained dry. Ice bounced off the table and skidded across the marble floor. The sound was violent, final. For a heartbeat, the room forgot how to breathe. Then came the reactions. A sharp inhale from the CFO, a chair scraping backward, a nervous, broken laugh that died instantly. One executive stood halfway from their seat, then sat back down, frozen between instinct and fear. Michael didn't move. Water streamed down his face. Droplets clung to his eyelashes. His hair was plastered to his forehead now, but his eyes were clear, steady, watching. Ethan exhaled, satisfied. "There," he said. "That's what happens when you don't respect the room." He tossed the empty cup aside. It clattered against the table and rolled to the floor. "Meeting's over," he added, already turning away. "Someone call facilities to clean this up." He walked back toward the head of the table, confident, restored. This was familiar territory. This was control. Behind him, water dripped rhythmically onto the marble. Drip, drip, drip. Michael finally spoke. "Ethan!" The name stopped him mid-step. Ethan turned slowly, irritation flashing across his face. "What now?" Michael took a single step forward. His shoes left wet prints behind him. "You think dignity comes from appearance," he said calmly. "From power. From being the one who never gets wet." Ethan scoffed. "And you think it comes from standing there and taking it?" Michael shook his head. "Nah," he said. "I think dignity comes from knowing who you are so deeply that no one can take it from you." The words landed differently now, not confrontational, not defensive, certain. Ethan felt something twist in his chest. He pushed it down immediately. "You're done," Ethan snapped. "Get out, before I have you escorted." Michael didn't argue. He simply met Ethan's eyes and said, "You're not afraid of falling." Ethan's jaw tightened. You're afraid of being seen when you fall." The room seemed to tilt. Before Ethan could respond, Michael added one final sentence. Quiet, precise, and that fear is about to become public. Near the door, the phone recording everything caught Ethan's face at the exact moment his confidence cracked, and the red light stayed on. The words hung in the air long after Michael finished speaking. No one moved. Ethan felt it first in his chest, a tightness he hadn't felt in years. Not panic. Not yet. Something closer to exposure, like a spotlight had snapped on inside him, revealing corners he'd kept dark on purpose. "You don't know what you're talking about," Ethan said, but the certainty was gone from his voice. Michael didn't respond right away. He looked around the room instead, at the executives who now avoided Ethan's gaze, at the screen still bleeding red numbers, at the city pressing against the glass. "You build a life where no one is allowed to look at you too closely," Michael said. Titles, distance, fear, all of it carefully arranged. Ethan laughed sharply. "You think you figured me out because I poured water on you?" "No," Michael replied. "I know because I've seen what you hide." Ethan stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "You're guessing," he said. "That's all this is, guesswork." Michael met his eyes. "You told legal to adjust the narrative before the Q2 investor call," he said calmly. "You approved the Indiana contract even after compliance flagged it. And last December, you forwarded internal numbers to protect your seat, then deleted the trail." The room inhaled as one. Ethan's face drained of color. "That's confidential," he snapped. You have no idea what you're saying. Michael tilted his head slightly. You buried a report that warned about safety risks, he continued. You told yourself it was temporary, that you'd fix it later. Ethan shook his head, backing away a step. This is insane. It didn't feel insane when you did it, Michael said gently. It felt necessary. A chair scraped loudly as someone stood near the door. Another phone came up. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Ethan felt the room slipping away from him, control leaking out through the cracks. You're threatening me, he said, trying to regain ground. That's what this is. Michael shook his head. I'm not threatening you. I'm seeing you. The sentence hit harder than any accusation. Ethan tried to laugh, but the sound broke halfway through. You expect me to believe a maintenance worker knows all this? Michael gave a sad, knowing smile. You responded when I called you by your first name, he said. Without correcting me. Ethan froze. You didn't even notice, Michael continued. But your body did, because somewhere inside, you knew I wasn't guessing. Silence fell again. Thicker now, heavier. Michael turned slightly toward the table. How many of you, he asked softly, have been told your value depends on whether he approves of you? A woman near the center of the table wiped at her eyes. Another man clenched his jaw, staring at the floor. Ethan felt something inside him crack. Enough, he barked. Security. No one came. Michael looked back at him. You can throw me out, he said. Fire me. Erase me. Ethan's voice trembled. I will, but it won't erase what you've already shown them, Michael replied. Or what you've shown yourself. Michael took a small step back. And Ethan, he added quietly, this is only the beginning. Near the door, the recording phone vibrated with notifications. The truth was already leaving the room. The first vibration came from the phone near the door. Then another. Then several more, short, sharp bursts that cut through the silence like warning shots. The executive holding the phone glanced down at the screen and went pale. Ethan noticed. What's happening? He demanded. No one answered him. The phone was passed discreetly to another hand, then another. Screens lit up across the table, one by one, like candles being lit at a vigil no one had planned. A link. A clip. 30 seconds long. The moment the water hit Michael's chest. The room reacted before Ethan could. A sharp intake of breath. Someone muttered, It's already out. Another whispered, It's on LinkedIn. Ethan lunged forward. Give me that. The phone was pulled back instinctively. He grabbed one off the table instead, scrolling furiously. The headline loaded in real time, bold and merciless. CEO humbles maintenance worker during board meeting. Video sparks outrage. His mouth went dry. How many views? He asked, though he already knew the answer wouldn't matter. 1,000, someone said. And climbing. Michael watched him, not with satisfaction, not with triumph, but with a quiet steadiness that made Ethan's skin crawl. This is defamation, Ethan snapped. This is out of context. Michael spoke gently. Context is what people just watched. Ethan turned on him. You planned this. No, Michael replied. You did. Ethan shook his head violently. You provoked me. You wanted a reaction. Michael nodded once. I wanted the truth. Ethan laughed, a short, hollow sound. You think this makes you righteous? Michael didn't answer right away. Instead, he said, You could have stopped at any point. The words landed like stones. You could have asked my name, Mana, Michael continued. You could have asked why I was there. You could have chosen restraint. Ethan's hands trembled now. He clenched them into fists, nails biting into his palms. You don't understand how this world works, he said. This company survives because of pressure, because of standards. Michael met his gaze. It survives despite your fear, he said. Not because of it. A notification chimed. Loud. Unavoidable. Someone near the window read aloud without meaning to. Investor Relations just emailed. They're requesting an emergency call. Another voice followed, quieter. HR is asking for statements. Ethan felt something drop in his stomach. Turn it off, he barked. All of it. Shut it down. You can't, Michael said. Ethan glared at him. You think you've won? Michael's expression softened, not in pity, but in truth. This isn't about winning, he said. It's about what happens when light enters a room that's been sealed for too long. Ethan stared at the screens, at the comments flooding in, former employees, partners, strangers who recognized the behavior instantly. This wasn't outrage. It was recognition. He looked back at Michael, searching for anger, for accusation. He found neither. Why are you doing this? Ethan asked, his voice barely audible now. Michael answered simply, because you don't need to be destroyed. Ethan scoffed weakly. Feels like it. Michael shook his head. It feels like exposure. Michael stepped back toward the door. Behind him, the city reflected in the glass. Clear, indifferent, watching. And once the truth is seen, he said, it doesn't go back into hiding. The door opened, and Ethan realized, too late. The room he controlled no longer belonged to him. By the time Ethan reached the hallway, the damage was already done. His phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Message after message stacked on top of each other. Texts, emails, alerts. He ignored them at first, pushing past the glass walls of the conference floor, trying to hold his posture, his pace steady. Assistants froze as he passed. Conversations died mid-sentence. They were all looking at their screens. In the elevator, alone at last, Ethan glanced down. 12,000 views, then 18,000, then 32,000, the number jumping faster than his mind could follow. The clip was everywhere. TikTok stitched it with captions like, Toxic CEO, and this is why people quit. On X, the comments were brutal, fast, unforgiving, but it was LinkedIn that made his chest tighten. Former employees, industry peers, people who had once praised his strong leadership. I worked for him. This is exactly how he was. We warned HR. Nothing changed. Leadership without humanity is just abuse. Ethan scrolled until his thumb went numb. A notification slid across the top of his screen. Board chair, call me. Now. The elevator doors opened into the parking garage. The cold air hit his face like a slap. He walked to his car on instinct, hands shaking so badly he missed the door handle the first time. Inside the car, silence pressed in. He called the board chair. It rang once. Ethan, the voice said, calm, controlled, dangerous. We need to meet 8 a.m. tomorrow. This is being blown out of proportion, Ethan said quickly. There's context. This isn't about legal, the voice cut in. It's about trust. The line went dead. Ethan dropped the phone onto the passenger seat. More notifications poured in. HR. We've received multiple complaints referencing the video. PR. We recommend no public statement at this time. Investor relations. Several partners are requesting clarification. Clarification. Ethan laughed once. Short, sharp, humorless. He looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror. Same suit, same face, same carefully constructed image. But the eyes were different. They were afraid. For the first time since he was a teenager, Ethan felt it clearly. The old, familiar fear he had spent his life outrunning. The fear of being seen. He started the engine, pulling out of the garage, the city swallowing him back into traffic. Above him, screens lit up in offices and apartments across the city, replaying the same moment again and again. The water, the silence, the look on his face, and somewhere, buried beneath the noise, a single truth began to surface. The internet hadn't misunderstood him. It had recognized him. And tomorrow morning, the people with the real power would decide what that meant. The boardroom felt colder than it had the day before. Different floor, different table, same glass walls. But this time, Ethan noticed how thick they were, how soundproof, how final. 12 members of the board sat already in place when he entered. No one stood. No one smiled. No one offered a handshake. That had never happened before. Ethan took the seat at the head of the table out of habit, then stopped. The board chair cleared his throat. "Ethan," he said evenly, "take the seat to your right. A small correction, a large message." Ethan complied, jaw tight, hands folded the way he'd once watched others do when they were about to lose something. A woman from an outside law firm introduced herself. Then another, independent counsel, HR compliance, crisis management. Words that sounded neutral, professional, until they weren't. "We've reviewed the footage," the board chair said. "We've also reviewed prior HR records." Ethan leaned forward. "This is a knee-jerk reaction. I can explain." "We're not finished," the chair interrupted. The lawyer slid a folder across the table. Inside were printed emails, timestamps, subject lines Ethan recognized instantly. "Multiple complaints," she continued, "over several years. Hostile work environment, retaliation, intimidation." Ethan felt the room tilt. "These were resolved," he said. "HR handled them." The HR representative shook her head. "They were closed," she said carefully. "Not resolved." Silence followed, the kind that didn't invite argument. "We're placing you on administrative leave effective immediately," the chair said. "Your access to systems will be suspended. An external investigation will begin today." Ethan's chest tightened. "You can't be serious." "We are," the chair replied. "This is about protecting the company." The word landed hard. Protecting the company from him. A security badge slid across the table. His badge. Deactivated. "You'll be escorted out," the chair added. "This isn't punitive. It's procedural." "Procedural." Ethan stood abruptly. "After everything I've done for this place," the chair met his eyes. "At what cost?" "Ethan." The question had no edge, no anger. That made it worse. 2 security guards appeared at the door. Not the ones Ethan knew. New faces, neutral expressions. "Sir," one of them said quietly, "this way." Ethan grabbed his folder, his phone, his dignity, what was left of it, and walked toward the exit. Conversation stopped as he passed through the hallway. People looked up, some with shock, some with relief, some with something like justice. At the elevator, Ethan tapped his badge out of habit. Nothing happened. The guard stepped forward and used his own. The doors slid open. That moment hurt more than the meeting. Inside the elevator, mirrors surrounded him, reflections from every angle. No place to look without seeing himself. The doors closed. As the elevator descended, Ethan's phone vibrated again. Breaking news. Board places CEO on leave after viral video. He closed his eyes. For years, he had believed power meant never being at the mercy of anyone else. But as the elevator reached the lobby, one truth became impossible to ignore. Power hadn't protected him. It had isolated him. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear and the noise, a memory stirred. A much younger version of himself, standing in a school cafeteria, wishing desperately not to be invisible. The doors opened, and Ethan stepped out into the beginning of his fall. The memory came without warning. Ethan stood in his apartment that night, city lights flickering through the windows, jacket still on, tie loosened but not removed. He hadn't turned on a single light. He didn't need to. The reflection in the glass showed him enough. And then the glass became something else. A cafeteria. The smell of disinfectant and overcooked food. Long plastic tables bolted to the floor. Voices bouncing off cinder block walls. Ethan was 17 again. He stood in line with a tray in his hands, shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the floor. His sneakers were worn thin at the sides, one sole starting to peel. His hoodie had been washed too many times. He knew it. He always knew it. 3 boys in private school jackets stood ahead of him, laughing loudly. One of them glanced back and smirked. "Man, you look like you pulled that outfit out of a dumpster." The others laughed. Not cruelly, casually, like it didn't matter. Ethan felt the heat rush to his face. His grip tightened on the tray until his knuckles turned white. He didn't say anything. He never did. Because saying something only made it worse. That was the day he made the promise. Never again. Never again would anyone look at him like that. Never again would he be small. Never again would he be invisible. The memory shifted. He was 9 now. Night. A small living room. A television playing too loudly. His father's voice rose first. Sharp, slurred, angry. Then the sound of something breaking. His mother's voice followed, pleading, then crying. Ethan stood frozen in the hallway, heart pounding so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. He waited for someone to stop it. A neighbor. The police? God. No one came. Later, much later, when the house was quiet again, Ethan sat on his bed, staring at the wall. He didn't cry. He didn't pray. He decided something instead. If God was real, he would have stopped this. Since he didn't, he must not exist. That decision felt clean, logical, protective. Believing in nothing hurt less than believing in someone who didn't show up. The memory released him slowly. Ethan blinked and found himself back in the present, hands resting on the kitchen counter, breathing shallow. The city outside hummed on, indifferent to his past. His phone buzzed again. More headlines, more opinions, more people defining him in public. He turned the phone face down. For the first time, Ethan understood something he had never allowed himself to see. He hadn't chased power because he loved control. He had chased it because he was terrified of being that boy again, standing in line, holding a tray, hoping no one noticed him. And suddenly, painfully, he saw the pattern. Every insult, every public humiliation, every moment he made someone else feel small. It wasn't strength, it was armor. A knock sounded in his mind. Not on the door, but somewhere deeper. A quiet certainty formed, unsettling and impossible to ignore. The man in the white shirt hadn't invented his fear. He had named it. And now that it had a name, Ethan realized something else. You can outrun fear for a long time, but eventually, it catches up. And when it does, it waits for you to look it in the eyes. Ethan didn't remember falling asleep. One moment he was standing in the dark kitchen, memories still echoing in his chest. The next, he was aware of motion. Smooth, vertical, enclosed. The elevator. Soft lighting. Muted hum. A faint reflection of his own face in brushed steel. He was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, eyes unfocused, when a hand appeared between the closing doors. The elevator stopped. The doors slid open. Michael stepped inside. Ethan froze. The man looked exactly the same as before. Plain white shirt, dark pants, simple shoes. But there was something wrong. Or rather, something impossible. He was dry. No water stains. No damp fabric. No trace of what had happened in the boardroom just hours earlier. The doors closed, sealing them in. "What are you doing here?" Ethan said hoarsely. "This building has security." Michael pressed the button for the lower level. "I know." Ethan reached for his phone. "I'm calling security." "You won't," Michael said gently. Ethan's hand stopped. "How did you get in?" he demanded. "Who are you, really?" Michael didn't answer right away. He studied the numbers above the door as they descended. "I was there," he said at last. Ethan scoffed weakly. You don't know anything about me." Michael turned toward him. "I was there when you were 17, he said. Standing in a cafeteria line, holding a tray so tightly your hands went numb. Ethan's breath caught. "You decided that day," Michael continued, "that you would never be invisible again." "That's not possible," Ethan whispered. "You couldn't know that." "I was there when you were 9, Michael said softly. "When you waited in the hallway. When no one came." The elevator seemed to slow. Ethan backed into the wall, heart racing. "You looked into my life," he said. "You researched me." "I didn't need to," Michael replied. "I watched." The word landed with weight. I was there when you closed your first deal by cutting a corner, Michael went on. You told yourself it was temporary, that it didn't define you. Ethan shook his head, panic rising. Stop. I was there when you chose silence instead of truth, Michael said. When you chose image instead of people. The elevator chimed softly. Lower level. The doors opened. Michael stepped out, then paused, turning back toward Ethan. Who are you? Ethan asked, his voice breaking. Michael looked at him, not with judgment, not with superiority, but with a deep, steady sorrow. I'm Jesus, he said simply. Silence. Ethan laughed. It came out sharp, uneven, almost hysterical. That's insane. I know, Jesus replied. Truth often sounds that way when it finally reaches the surface. I don't believe in God, Ethan said quickly. I decided that a long time ago. I know, Jesus said again. You decided when you were 9. Ethan's knees weakened. You thought if I were real, Jesus continued, I would have stopped the pain, and when I didn't, you chose not to see me. Ethan slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor. Then where were you? He demanded, tears burning behind his eyes. Where were you when I needed you? Jesus knelt in front of him, level, close. I was there, he said. But you were too busy surviving to look up. The elevator doors began to close behind them, and for the first time in decades, Ethan didn't argue. He just listened. Ethan pressed his back against the elevator wall, trying to breathe. I don't believe this, he said. I can't. Jesus didn't move. He stayed where he was, level with Ethan, close enough that there was no room for performance. I'm not asking you to believe yet, Jesus said quietly. I'm asking you to be honest. Ethan shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping his throat. Honest? You think honesty fixes what's coming? I'm about to lose everything. Jesus looked at him, not accusing, not alarmed, just clear. You're not afraid of losing your job, he said. You're afraid of seeing yourself without it. Ethan's jaw tightened. You don't understand how this world works. I do, Jesus replied. I just don't worship it. The words stung because they were calm, because they weren't defensive. Ethan pushed himself to his feet, pacing the small space. If you are who you say you are, he said, voice rising, then answer me this. Where were you when my father hit my mother? Where were you when I begged someone, anyone, to stop it? Jesus stood as well, but he didn't crowd him. I was there, he said, and I was grieving with you. That's not an answer, Ethan snapped. If you were real, you would have done something. I did, Jesus said gently. I stayed. Ethan froze. You wanted power, Jesus continued, because power feels like safety when love fails. You wanted control because control feels like protection when trust breaks. Ethan's eyes burned. So you just watched me become this? Jesus shook his head. I walked with you every time you chose survival over truth. I didn't force you. I waited. Ethan's shoulders sagged. Then why now? Because you finally stopped running, Jesus said, even if only for a moment. The elevator doors opened onto the empty garage. Concrete, fluorescent light, silence. Jesus stepped out and turned back to Ethan. Tomorrow, he said, the board will take your power. Lawsuits will follow. People you frightened will finally speak. Ethan's chest tightened. So that's it? Punishment? No, Jesus replied. Consequences. Ethan laughed weakly. Same thing. They feel the same, Jesus said, but they are not. Ethan leaned against the door frame, exhausted. I don't know how to do this any other way, he admitted. I don't know who I am without the armor. Jesus met his eyes. That's the question, he said. Do you want to be right, or do you want to be true? The words echoed, not in the space, but inside Ethan. Right meant fighting, spinning, blaming, surviving. True meant standing still, letting things fall, being seen. Ethan swallowed hard. And if I choose wrong? Jesus' expression softened. I'll still be here. Ethan closed his eyes. For the first time, he didn't argue, didn't defend, didn't perform. He just stood there, shaking, with nothing left to say. Jesus turned toward the stairwell. Tomorrow will take what you build on fear, he said over his shoulder. But when there's nothing left to hide behind, you'll finally be able to choose. The door closed behind him. Ethan was alone again. But the silence felt different now. It wasn't empty. It was waiting. Morning came too quickly. Ethan sat at his kitchen table, untouched coffee cooling beside him, phone vibrating nonstop. He didn't need to check it to know what it was. The night had been long. The silence afterward even longer. He finally picked up the phone. Class action filed. Former employees allege hostile work environment. Board confirms independent investigation. The words felt unreal, like headlines from someone else's life. His attorney called at 7:12 a. We need to talk, she said without preamble. This is moving faster than expected. How bad? Ethan asked. A pause. Then, 23 former employees so far. More may join. 23. Ethan closed his eyes. By noon, the emails started coming in. Statements from HR, requests from auditors, notices from insurers. His calendar emptied itself as meetings were canceled without explanation. At 2:07 p.m., his lawyer called again. There's something else, she said. We need to be careful about communications. Anything you send, anything can be subpoenaed. Ethan nodded, though she couldn't see him. I understand. But fear has a way of shrinking judgment. That evening, alone in his apartment, Ethan opened his laptop. He stared at the screen for a long time before typing a short message to a private consultant he'd used once before. Someone known for handling sensitive matters. Need advice on limiting exposure. Documents. Urgent. He hesitated. Jesus' question echoed in his mind. Right. Or true. Ethan's finger hovered over the trackpad. Then the fear surged back. Hot. Familiar. Convincing. He clicked send. The reply came the next morning. Not from the consultant. From his lawyer. Ethan, she said, voice tight. Your email was leaked. What? He whispered. It's circulating online. Screenshots. Timestamps. They're calling it an attempt to destroy evidence. Ethan's blood ran cold. He opened his phone. There it was. His words. His name. Millions of views. Former CEO caught trying to erase records. From accused to guilty, he dropped the phone. The room spun. The armor had failed him again. The lawyer's voice continued, distant now. This changes things. Criminal exposure is now possible. We need to prepare. Ethan didn't respond. He sat on the floor, back against the couch, hands shaking. He thought of Michael's voice. Calm, certain. You could have stopped at any point. That afternoon, a process server knocked at his door. Court date. Summons. Class action confirmed. As the door closed behind the server, Ethan slid down until he was sitting on the floor again. Everything he had built on fear was collapsing exactly the way Jesus had said it would. And for the first time, Ethan didn't try to fix it. He didn't make a call, didn't send a message, didn't reach for control. He just sat there, breathing unevenly, staring at the wall. Consequences weren't punishment. They were truth catching up. And now, there was nowhere left to run. The question returned, quiet, relentless, unavoidable. Do you still want to be right, or are you ready to be true? The courthouse was smaller than Ethan expected. No towering columns, no dramatic steps, just concrete, glass, and fluorescent light. Ordinary, unromantic, unforgiving. The kind of place where stories ended without applause. Cameras waited outside anyway. Reporters shouted his name as he walked past, microphones thrust forward like weapons. Do you regret your actions? Did you try to destroy evidence? Is this the end of your career? Ethan didn't answer. Inside, the noise fell away, replaced by a hush that felt heavier than any crowd. The courtroom was already filling. On one side, his legal team, efficient, distant. On the other, rows of former employees, 23 faces. Some he recognized instantly, others only vaguely. But every one of them carried something he had put there. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Everyone sat. The case began. One by one, the witnesses were called. A former project manager described panic attacks that started on Sunday nights. An analyst spoke about being publicly mocked for asking questions. A mother of two explained why she hid in the restroom to cry between meetings. Each story was different. Each one sounded the same. By the time the last witness returned to their seat, Ethan felt hollow. There was no argument left inside him, no clever framing, no excuse that didn't sound like cowardice. Then the attorney for the plaintiffs stood again. "We call Michael Reyes," she said. The room shifted. Ethan's heart stuttered as Michael entered. Same simple clothes, same quiet presence. No anger in his face, no satisfaction. He took the stand and was sworn in. "Mr. Reyes," the attorney began, "you were the individual humiliated in the video that went viral. Can you describe what happened?" Michael did, simply, clearly, without embellishment. When he finished, the attorney asked, "How did that moment affect you?" Michael paused. "I was sad," he said. "Not for myself, for him." A murmur moved through the courtroom. The attorney hesitated. "Do you forgive the defendant?" Michael turned slightly, meeting Ethan's eyes. "Yes," he said. "Completely." Ethan's breath caught. "But," Michael continued, turning back to the judge, "forgiveness doesn't erase harm, and it doesn't cancel truth." The courtroom was still. "I forgive, Michael said, "but justice still matters. People were hurt. That harm deserves to be acknowledged." The judge nodded slowly. No drama followed, no shouting, just procedure, evidence, deliberation. When the ruling came, it was firm. Liability established, damages awarded, mandatory community service ordered, oversight and restrictions imposed. Ethan listened without reaction. Outside the courtroom, lawyers spoke in low voices. Reporters surged again. Flashbulbs popped. Ethan stepped into the hallway and leaned against the wall, dizzy. Then he felt a hand rest lightly on his shoulder. He didn't need to look. "Still want to be right?" Jesus asked softly. Ethan swallowed. "No," he said. His voice cracked. "I just want to stop lying." Jesus nodded. "That's where truth begins," he said. Ethan stared at the floor. "I lost everything." Jesus shook his head. "You lost what you built on fear." Ethan closed his eyes, tears slipping free at last. "And what's left?" he whispered. Jesus squeezed his shoulder once, gentle and steady. "What's left," he said, "is the part of you that can finally be real." Jesus stepped back, already turning away. "I'll see you again," he added, "when you're learning how to serve." Ethan looked up. Jesus was gone, but for the first time since the boardroom, since the water, since the fall, Ethan didn't feel empty. He felt exposed and strangely lighter, because justice had been done. And forgiveness had opened the door to something he'd never allowed himself to want. A life without armor. 6 months later, the kitchen smelled like onions and simmering broth. Steam rose from a row of industrial-sized pots, fogging the small windows of the community food pantry. Volunteers moved in quiet coordination, chopping vegetables, stacking trays, wiping counters. No one rushed. No one shouted. Ethan stood at the stove in a plain white apron, sleeves rolled up, hands roughened by work he wasn't used to. 6 months ago, he would have hated this place. The noise, the lack of control, the absence of hierarchy. Now, it felt honest. He lifted a ladle, poured soup into bowls, passed them down the line. His movements were steady, deliberate. No one watched him. No one cared who he used to be. That mattered more than he expected. "Table 5 needs refills," a woman called from the back. Doña Rosa, the coordinator, short, sharp-eyed, kind in a way that didn't coddle. "I've got it," Ethan said. He carried the tray carefully through the narrow space between tables. Families sat together. Elderly men ate in silence. A young mother rocked a sleeping child while balancing a bowl on her knee. Ethan set the tray down. "Thank you," a man said quietly. Ethan nodded. "Of course." He turned to head back when someone bumped into him. The tray tilted. A cup of water slipped, fell, and burst against the table, splashing down onto Ethan's shirt. The sound stopped him cold. Water. For a split second, he wasn't in the kitchen anymore. He was back in the boardroom. Glass walls, polished table, ice hitting marble. The laughter that cut short, the look in Michael's eyes. His breath caught. His hands trembled. I'm sorry," the volunteer stammered. Young, new, terrified he'd done something wrong. Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked down at the water spreading across the table, dripping onto the floor. Slowly, deliberately, he set the tray aside. Then he knelt. Right there on the kitchen floor, Ethan took a cloth and began to wipe the water away. Carefully, thoroughly, as if each movement mattered. No one noticed. No one recorded it. That was the point. As he cleaned, something inside him finally broke. Not in anger, not in shame, but in understanding. He felt the weight of what he'd done to another human being, not as an idea, not as a verdict, but in his body, in his breath, in his bones. Tears came quietly. He didn't wipe them away. When he finished, he stood, nodded once to the stunned volunteer. "It's okay," he said. "Really." He turned and saw him. Jesus stood near the doorway, leaning lightly against the frame. Same simple clothes, same calm presence, watching, not judging. Ethan walked toward him, stopping a few steps away. "I did it," Ethan said, voice low. "I became exactly what I hated." Jesus nodded. "I know. I hurt people," Ethan continued. "Some will never forgive me." "I know," Jesus said again. Ethan swallowed. "I don't know how to fix it." "You can't," Jesus replied gently. "Some things don't get fixed. They heal, slowly." Ethan let out a shaky breath. "Then what do I do?" Jesus looked around the room. The soup, the volunteers, the quiet dignity of people being served. "You keep showing up," he said. You serve. You listen. You stay small without hating yourself for it." Ethan closed his eyes. For the first time in 43 years, he stopped fighting. "I don't want to be great anymore," he said. "I just want to be true." Jesus smiled, not triumphant, not proud, peaceful. "That's all I ever wanted for you," he said. Jesus stepped back toward the door. "Wait," Ethan said. "Will I ever get back what I lost?" Jesus paused. "You won't get back the image," he said. "The applause, the illusion." Ethan nodded. "I know. But you'll gain something better," Jesus continued. "A life where you don't have to pretend." Jesus turned to leave. "And Ethan?" "Yes. You don't need to be seen by everyone," Jesus said softly. "You just need to be seen by the truth." He was gone. That evening, Ethan sat alone in his small apartment. No skyline view, no floor-to-ceiling glass, just a window overlooking a parking lot and a folding chair on the balcony. He held his phone in his hands. A message waited on the screen. "Dad, can we talk sometime?" Ethan smiled, a small, real smile, and typed back, "Anytime you're ready." He set the phone down and watched the sun dip below the buildings. Ethan Carter never became powerful again. He never reclaimed his reputation. Some doors stayed closed. Some people never forgave him. But he learned how to live without armor. And in a quiet kitchen, on a wet floor, kneeling where no one applauded. He finally met the man he was meant to be. Some stories don't end with applause. They end with silence. Not the empty kind, but the kind that comes after truth has finally been spoken. Ethan never became famous again. He never reclaimed his power, his title, or the image he once protected at all costs. Some people still crossed the street when they recognized him. Some never forgave him. And yet, his life became quieter, lighter, because for the first time, he no longer needed to be impressive to feel real. This story isn't about a CEO. It isn't even about downfall. It's about what happens when a human being stops hiding behind fear and allows truth to look back at them. Maybe you've never stood in a glass boardroom. Maybe you've never held power over others. But you've felt shame. You've felt invisible. You've worn armor just to survive. And maybe, like Ethan, you're tired of pretending. If this story stirred something in you, sit with it for a moment. Truth doesn't rush. Grace doesn't shout. And if you want to keep walking these quiet roads of faith, justice, and redemption, we invite you to join us on YouTube at Heaven Walks With Us. Subscribe, stay, listen. Because sometimes heaven doesn't arrive in miracles. Sometimes it walks beside us until we're ready to stop running.